Questions. Questions that need answering.
Welcome to the Q&A. I'd like to start with a thank you to everyone who's joined the channel over the last few months, and of course a big thanks to those who have been here even longer. So in a community post here on YouTube and over on Patreon, I asked everyone for some Q&A questions. So let's get into those. I'm going to begin with the questions from my patrons. If you're interested in supporting the channel, head over and check out the Patreon after this. I look forward to discussing hobby projects and secret junk hauls with you on our Discord. First question. Do I only make scratch builds of large models, or do I mix it up and build some Games Workshop, D&D centerpieces, terrain, etc.? So currently I'm not working on any specific Games Workshop projects using official kits, but I have in the past and probably will again. Some of the things I would do would be more simple modifications to individual character models and that sort of thing. For D&D, right now our in-person campaign is kind of on hold, so any sort of terrain building for that is also on hold. I definitely want to return to that, as well as probably getting back into modifying Games Workshop models as well. Do you think you'll branch out and try different stuff, different techniques and tutorials? Yes, definitely. I'm going to keep on trying all types of different hobby techniques and maybe some unknown hobby techniques. I've actually got a few interesting ones coming up that I don't think I've ever seen anyone do, but should be pretty easy to replicate. So in terms of specific tutorials, probably yes. I'm going to say yes. I try to sort of explain everything in the course of my builds, but I might make some dedicated videos for that as well. How you been? I've been great. Thank you for asking. Big goals for the channel and would I like to do it full time? Yes. The big goal would be I'd like to do it full time. I already feel like I spend full time on it, but if it became a career, that would be amazing. Really a dream. Favorite and least favorite part of the process? I think editing is quite time consuming. I'm not using the greatest tools, so that probably takes a little bit more time than is needed. Although I do enjoy it, it's just kind of a long process. Probably the toughest thing about the builds in terms of actually shooting the footage is sometimes remembering to turn the camera on. I'm really a improv or flying by the seat of my pants type builder, and sometimes I get away to tinkering and start getting it through a build, and then I realize that I haven't filmed any of the process, and I have to sort of backtrack, try to remember what I did, and capture it on film. What kind of airbrush? I'm not sure the exact model, but it's an older Iwata airbrush that I was lent by a friend, and I still have it. So thanks for the long-term loan, buddy. What would be my big dream build? Well, obviously something like an Emperor Titan would be kind of cool to make, like a 4-foot tall model. It's always fun to dream about doing that sort of thing. Besides that, maybe just a really huge Orc Gargant would be pretty sweet as well. I think pretty much any Titanic scale model from the Warhammer 40k universe would be a pretty good dream big build. Do I plan on selling merch? If people want it, I might consider it. If I was providing any sort of physical product, I think my ideal situation would be that I'd be actually providing some kind of aid, component, or tool that contributes directly to the hobby. So merch is all well and good, nothing against it. I mean, everyone likes to wear t-shirts and drink out of mugs, but if I could do some sort of kit or tool, I think that would really be a big dream come true. Okay, getting into the comment questions. How do you make vehicles look different to their components? I think the real key here is to whatever your starting model or toy or object is, I generally try to disassemble it down as far as I can. So if I'm making a tank for Warhammer out of a real historical tank, I don't want to have the shape of that old tank. I just want to take the detailed components. So you'll see in my Orc Battle Wagon build, I used a tank model, but I split apart the top panel and actually used it to make the sides. So you get to still keep all the cool detail of the kits, but you're not really keeping the profile or silhouette, really just using it as like a parts donor. I think that's the key. Try to break it down as much as possible and just take the individual components as if they were fresh, small bits from a kit, and then use those to reconstruct a new shape that you've designed. If money was no object, what are the top 5 items you'd buy for the hobby immediately? Let's see. A giant workshop with tons of storage, and a huge bench so I can have a million projects going at once and store lots of junk. More realistically, probably just a proper camera and tripod or some sort of suspended arm so I can work without it getting in my way but easily capture the whole process. Some of the other nifty tools like a Proxxon foam cutter, even like a traditional band saw for more easily breaking down some of the things that I find to get components out of. I think I've only listed 3 things so far. 3D printer would be really awesome, and maybe vacuuming equipment, vacuum or pressure chamber equipment for casting, so that when I made my own components from scratch, I could also replicate them really easily. I think that's covered everything. If we're talking about sparing no expense, I wouldn't say no to some really good ice cream, and maybe even getting my videos narrated by Richard Kiley. Part hunting guidelines, and is there a time when I say no, something is too silly? Definitely, I say no to stuff if it's too big, too dirty, if it is kind of rubbery, like if it doesn't have a hard surface that's conducive to building models out of. Is it not going to hold paint well? That sort of thing. Otherwise, if it's small and has enough detail, it gets collected. How does being a YouTube creator affect your passion / mental health towards the art? Thanks for the kind comment. I'm going to say that it actually keeps me inspired to build more. I'm probably getting a little bit of a traffic jam of ideas because I'm getting really excited to share all this different stuff with everyone. But otherwise, I'd say it's pretty much what I've always had going, except now, instead of having it be something I work on from time to time, I'm just dedicating tons of time and mental effort to putting it all together. So you can expect to continue to see the same sort of level coming out of me in terms of my work. What impact do I think 3D printing will have on the hobby? And is it something I look forward to? I think 3D printing will give people more options to make more highly customized armies in terms of like Warhammer, like getting customized units. For smaller scale or individual model games like D&D, I think it's just really cool. You can make your character look exactly how you want them to, until they get killed off, of course. In terms of kit bashing, scratch building, I definitely look forward to it. I have a certain amount of experience with 3D modeling, so I'm looking forward to doing a little bit of digital scratch building and then getting that printed out into the physical world. So I think it's going to be really cool and open up a whole new realm of building, really. Not a question, but someone talking about Mega Bloks Halo Shotgun. Yes, I use Mega Bloks. That's not a big secret. Some people think it's Lego, but it's Mega Bloks. Starter tips for learning how to make models. Just get some regular model kits and follow the instructions, put them together to kind of see how stuff like the different tools and glues work, learn about cleaning up your mold lines and that sort of thing. Once you get comfortable using the tools, just start to find interesting pieces, and then whatever your mind can think of, try to make it a reality. Start out by modifying existing stuff. Don't try, well, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'd say I would recommend not starting just trying to make everything from scratch right away. It's a lot easier just to put a new gun on a tank or, paint it a different color than it is to build it from the ground up. But definitely start out with official kits. You can even get cheapo stuff, or even like car kits, like car model kits, as opposed to wargaming kits, which are way more expensive. It's probably the kind of thing you can even find at garage sales or thrift stores, that kind of thing. So start out with those, modify them, and then go from there. What are the most versatile bits of junk I've ever been able to use? This will come as no surprise, but I think it is the standard 2x4 bump Mega Bloks piece. It's got a perfect right angle, it's made of a great quality plastic, it's just really easy to use as the externals of models, or also to build the internal structure and keep everything lined up. They're just great to work with. That's why you see them in almost everything. And I have a nearly limitless supply, courtesy of garage sales, thrift stores, hand-me-downs. So yeah, that's definitely my top item. And I'm not saying that Mega Bloks are junk, but it's my best quote-unquote junk item. When doing a build, do I start out with an end goal, or do I just look at the parts? I do both. I'll usually do a whole bunch of sketches about what I think I'm going to achieve, and then once I go quote-unquote shopping in my bits pile, that kind of refines the overall thing. So I think it's a pretty even mix of the two. A bunch of pre-planning, and then kind of seeing where the bits take me. I let the junk speak to me, if that makes sense. What are the essential tools? Well, a glue gun is very valuable for quickly assembling things. I think that standard snipping pliers or wire cutters are very useful for almost every type of disassembly or reshaping, and then just a good knife. It doesn't even have to be that good, just a sharp knife, like a Ulfa knife or any other sort of retractable knife, X-Acto knife, that type of thing. Are there any tools that I use in a non-standard way? I'd say besides using like wood files on plastic or the cutoff wheel on a Dremel to shape dried spackle, no, I pretty much use tools for their intended use. Next question, I'd love to start building stuff but don't know where to start. I think this is sort of a similar answer to that earlier question. Start out with some simple model kits, just try to follow the instructions, and then begin making modifications to those type of kits until you get more and more comfortable with attaching different types of material and using all the tools, and then just kind of go from there. It just takes practice, basically. When did I start doing these kinds of projects? I think it started maybe even before I heard about Warhammer. I started making my own custom video game characters. So there was a game called Quake 2, awesome game with an even better soundtrack. And the main enemies in that game were cyborgs called the Strogs, and so I started modifying G.I. Joes by like cutting off their arms and adding embedded weapons and that sort of thing to make them look more like the Strog soldiers. So that was probably my start with making any type of custom materials. In terms of when I got into doing it for Warhammer, well, I guess pretty much right away, because even when I was building kits for the actual armies, I was building terrain, so I'd always try and find, like, you know, chunks of foam from electronics packaging and just scrap cardboard or sticks to make trees, that sort of thing. So probably when I was about 11 or 12 years old, I started building projects using scrap materials. Give me the secrets of junk hauling. It's not totally magic. I think you have to just develop an eye for it in some ways, but garage sales are super cheap, so you can also just buy up a whole bunch of stuff and then sort through it later. What can I take apart that has a lot of good looking weapon bits in it? That's a good question. Very specific. I'd say in terms of just generically lots of good looking bits, older electronics that had a lot more mechanical parts, like old alarm clocks, VCRs, cassette players, that type of thing. Those have a lot of really great small plastic components in it. In terms of weapons, I think my favorite so far has been soap dispensers. Any sort of pump top dispenser usually has a lot of really cool cylindrical components inside of it. I've actually showed them on my junk hauls sometimes. And a close second would be spray bottles. So like a Windex bottle. You take that spray assembly apart. Inside of there's a whole bunch of plastic pistons and cylinders. And those would be really good to make a wide range of gun barrels. I'm assuming you were talking about projectile weapons. Do I also do a lot of scratch-built or heavily customized miniatures? I don't currently do a lot of scratch-built or customized miniatures, but in the past I have. I was really, really inspired by this Golden Demon winner named, I think his name is Tony Orteza. I'm going to look it up and put it on the screen here. He made this awesome Black Templars army where he used tons of green stuff to customize them with all sorts of robes and seals, and they had custom bases. All the bikers were riding horses. He made his own custom dreadnoughts out of epic scale titans, and it was really awesome. So I got into doing a little bit more modification. I started learning how to use green stuff, adding, you know, just a little bit more detail to my miniatures, cloaks and banners and parchments and all that stuff that makes absolutely no sense, but also is totally appropriate for the grim dark. And I would certainly like to get into doing that again, although my focus has obviously been recently on making stuff, a lot more stuff, like from scratch, basically. Next question, can I do a walkthrough of my area? Not in this video, but yes, sometime I will show my work area and show you about my supplies and storage. I have done a video on my storage of materials. It's very messy, but you can go check that out. I actually put that out for 1,000 subscribers, which wasn't so long ago. Are there any books that I'd recommend for inspiration to give me ideas? Actually, none come to mind now, although when I was a kid, I did spend a lot of time looking at these books from the library, which were those cutaway books. You could see the inside of battleships, or like a cutaway and see the inside of a castle. I always found those really interesting because I like to see all the internal mechanisms of how things work. That might have lended a little bit to getting me into the type of design I do. Not that I've read them firsthand, but there are some really cool art books, and I believe that Luca Zampriolo from Calamity has an art book for all of his mechs and all the mech components and the world that they exist in. I don't own a copy, but that has a lot of really cool mech inspiration in it. And then in terms of teaching construction techniques, I would say, even though I'm not familiar with any books, if you just look at reference images of like oil refineries or other industrial sites, you'll get a sense of how the support structures and conduits and all that stuff kind of goes together, which can kind of get you started down that path if you want to make that kind of terrain or those type of models. How do I create my ideas? I just have a huge idea list. I usually think of something that doesn't really have a model right now in Warhammer, for example, or has a model that I think I could improve on in some way, or just make cheaper by making it from scratch, and I build off of that. Favorite D&D character I've ever played? That's going to be a College of Lore Bard. I think that's the best spellcaster in D&D, most versatile, and just a ton of fun to play. Both mechanically and the RP side of it is really awesome to play a bard. How did you get so good? I just spent a lot of time building stuff and drawing, like decades. That's my only answer. Maybe I have a little bit of natural talent too. Do you play 40k? If so, when did I get into it? And if not, when did I get into the building? I do occasionally play. I've been collecting Warhammer Army for quite a long time. I got into it just before high school. A friend of a friend showed me one of those two-piece kit Marines painted up like Legion of the Damned. I thought it was the coolest thing ever, so I got into Space Marines, and that's still what I have. I have a big old Ultramarines army. I know that's got to be the most standard vanilla type thing, but that's what I've got. The next question, oh, it's the exact same thing. I got into Warhammer when a friend of a friend showed me a cool Space Marine, and I got inspired and started collecting, and I have a big old Ultramarines army, and that was my first army, and that's still my army. Gork or Mork? Hey, why not both? Why did I start out on YouTube and how did I get interested? I was already watching lots of hobby YouTubers and doing my own hobby stuff, and I got laid off from a boring office job, so I decided to combine the two, putting the hobby stuff I was already doing onto YouTube. Next question, do I play 40k, and if yes, Army Showcase? Ooh. So as I previously stated, yes I do. Army Showcase? Sure, why not? Sometime I'll do an Army Showcase video. My official Games Workshop kit Army is a lot less impressive than my scratch builds, but sure, I'll show it off. Who's the meanest, greenest race in the galaxy? Great question. I think we'll find out next month, right? Plans for future videos? I have tons of plans. Pretty much any D&D thing you can think of, any Warhammer thing you can think of, scenery, large models, vehicles, they're all somewhere in the works. Scenery videos, for sure. I'd actually like to get a little bit more into some of the grimdark, maybe even the Necromunda area. There's a couple inspiring YouTubers that are doing that type of stuff, especially Eric. If I had an infinite amount of time and resources, what would my dream build be? Well, that's probably the same as my dream big build. Probably a giant Titan would be pretty cool. Emperor class Titan. Next question. Ooh, seems pretty similar. Next big build. Oh, the next big build is going to be, okay, wink wink, something for orcs for next month. Something that I want to try and build. I would actually really like to try my hand at building something for Tau or Eldar. They have a really fine construction, a lot less messy than something Imperial or Orcish. So it would take a little bit higher level of skill, I think, but I really like the design of the vehicles for those races. What are some of the games that I play? Does that mean in terms of video, board game, tabletop games? I mean, I occasionally play Warhammer. I play D&D every week. I love board games. I really like Dominion, the deck building game. In terms of video games, I don't play many video games anymore, but I was heavily into Dota, and then Dota 2 once Steam took over. Thanks for the nice comment. Next question, how to make that thing in the picture? That is a tank loosely inspired by a Lehman Russ. I purchased those loose treads, which come from a G.I. Joe vehicle, at a weird open-air rummage sale, and I thought I could probably make a vehicle using them. I actually thought I'd make something for orcs, but I ended up making this more Imperial-looking thing. I do not have a video of it. It's from before I started the channel, although I do have a few work in progress pictures, so maybe I'll toss them up when I'm editing this. What got me to scratch building and Warhammer? Well, now, as I've stated, I was inspired to join up in Warhammer just before I became a teenager, and scratch building I think was sort of an evolution from building terrain, which was something that's always been a part of the hobby. What do I usually do with the models I create? I have given some away and sold some, and I have some that are just sitting on a shelf, which is good because I was able to pull them back out and film them for this video. What are your essential building products, or what's a secret weapon in construction? I've got to say that the hot glue gun is the absolute most essential building product, not just for adhesive, but also as a gap filler and reinforcement structural elements. I think that's like the most important tool that I use. Maybe the secret weapon would be Spackle. I know it's kind of a weird choice, but you can use it to really unify a build when you're using a lot of weird separate components. It's a nice little gap filler. You can water it down just to remove those little seams and lines, and you can really change the overall surface of something using it. Would I ever consider doing an orc plane or jet? Yeah, definitely. I haven't yet, but totally. That's on the list. Why do I use spackle and not epoxy? So I do use epoxy putty like green stuff sometimes. The reason I use spackle so often is because it's super cheap, super easy to work with. Once you've got it, you can thin it to fill gaps. You can use it to build up structure. You can sand it back down, carve it. It's not quite as tough as epoxy, obviously, but for something like a terrain build or in the recessed area of a vehicle where you're really just seeing it, but you're not able to, bash it and test its absolute strength, it's a really great material. I wouldn't use spackle to, make the edge of something that would be exposed, because it would be prone to chipping under certain impacts. Do I know of any model kits that are great for getting bits and greeblies? Not really from experience, because I don't have that many, but standard car kits or standard model kits for tanks, or probably really any type of vehicle, they tend to have a lot of little fine detailed pieces, which are great for detailing and making greeblies. Next question, who would win in a fight? Leman Russ or 100 actual wolves driving Leman Russ tanks? Oh, are the wolves awakened via the level 5 spell Awaken? If they are, I think the actual wolves win, hands down. How do I look at something and see its potential as something else? It is a combination of training and definitely some natural ability. What sort of happens is I look at the whole and then maybe I isolate a little portion of it, and I'm just thinking in terms of what I can actually use a tool like a Dremel or a saw to extract. So I kind of picture each little area of the surface or each piece as something that I can take and separate and then use somewhere else. Once you know about the capabilities of your tools and the possibility for disassembly, I think that starts to open up the options of how you can think about using pieces or items in another project. How do I store all of my pieces? Check out my 1000 subscriber video. You can see my really crazy storage unit. I don't have a lot of organizational skill, period, and that is reflected in the storage unit. There's just lots of boxes with lots of interesting stuff. How long did it take me to get started? Not long. I've been collecting stuff for so long that once I got into making more builds, I already really had a big reserve to pull from, so I kind of got into it right away. How do I overcome failure? I think one of the keys is to not go into a project with too rigid of an idea. That way, if something doesn't work quite as you intended, you can still kind of make the piece work. That being said, there's a lot of times where I've begun to go down a path and whatever it was, for whatever reason, just wasn't working. Sometimes I just break it apart and resalvage the pieces, or I start again from scratch. And that ties in nicely with how do I overcome cost. I use tons of junk, which is essentially free. So stuff doesn't cost that much. If you make a mistake, it's not worth much unless the piece that you're using is really unique, in which case I'd probably struggle to reclaim it and try to use it again. But otherwise, yeah, I'm using basically recycled materials for the majority of my work. So easy to overcome cost. Have I tried Gunpla? No, but I really want to, and so that is definitely on the on deck. That's coming up. How would you kit bash Slanesh? Where would you even begin? Oh, this is funny. Okay, well, looking at the current design from Games Workshop, I think I would start with a Barbie doll and a Ken doll, split them down the center and attach them together, and build off of that. That's a pretty good base, I think. Final question. How would you build / bash a Scylla light tank? I seem to recall seeing a guide that used Chimera tracks, because they seem to still have pretty wide tracks. I haven't yet attempted to build any really strict Imperial design stuff like that. I'm actually probably going to try and make a small Grot tank, but those are a little bit more liberal in their design. I think I would probably start with a small plastic bulldozer toy. That might be the foundation for it, just to get some of the detailing for the top and maybe even to work in the sides. And then the tread itself, if you didn't have the official Games Workshop tracks, you could potentially modify tracking that comes off of a smaller scale plastic tank or construction vehicle. I think you probably have an easier time finding a wide range of construction vehicles than you would tanks. And I'm talking in terms of toys, not model kits. For model kits, I'm sure you could find a ton of tanks, but they're a little bit pricey, so it might not be economical to make a whole unit of Sentinels stand-ins that are Scylla tanks. And that's it. Thanks to everyone for the questions, and thanks for sticking with it. If you want to see me building models, please check out my other videos and subscribe to the channel. Again, if you'd like to support me on Patreon, you can head over there and check out the different options. And I'll take this opportunity to thank my patrons. Here they are. Look at them. If you haven't already, make sure to turn on notifications, and that way you'll be able to see when my next build video goes live. And I will see you then in my next build, or my next epic build video.